Hi everyone, Bandanner here. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the RTS Cast and Stuff channel for another deck build. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. The 24th ranked deck is what we're going for today. From the title, as you can tell, this is one of the strongest divisions in the game right now. Possibly the most OP of them all. Yes, I'm sure we could have a debate about that in the comments for hours. I'm sure people feel differently about certain divisions, but it is certainly one of the top divisions right now. It came out last year to not a lot of fanfare. People very much underestimated how strong it was, but it was even a strong deck back then due to its spam ability and the Strike Eagle, which is a very strong jet. As time went on, we saw it played more in tournament games, and we saw T-Man doing some serious damage with it. And then with the recent patch that changed veterancy, it's obviously made it even stronger. So, you know, if you want to play meta and you want to take a very strong deck, 24th is one of those decks. The other thing to mention is it's a deck that has a lot of low point activation slots, which means that you can fill out everything you would want to take and then you're going to have points left over. It's a little bit broken in that respect. So you can genuinely just take everything you want. There's no way you can fill this up and not have points left over to spend on random stuff. I think that would be very difficult. Now, one thing I want to mention about this division are military police and the reservist trait, because obviously the National Guard troops have the reservist trait. It's broken again. The military police thing is apparently broken again. I'm told by a wooden box, as I've double checked, because for a little while, a very short while it seems, I did play a version of the game which it was fixed in, and now it's broken again. The problem is it's possible that that version never made it to the public. I'm not sure. So apologies if I've given misinformation on that in the past, because genuinely it was fixed and it appears to be broken. But at the moment there are a few broken traits, because it's also the case that the traits where you stand still, so snipers, GSR, those aren't working, or at least they're not showing that they're working. We can't quite decide. So let's just assume traits are a bit knackered at the minute. So what I wanted to quickly tell you was what the reservist trait does, because I think that's important to understand. Many thanks to Naled over at WarYes on the WarYes Discord. They have a game knowledge channel, and Naled lists all of the stuff from the code in there. So the reservist trait has a plus 33% suppression damage received, plus 10% aim time, minus 10% static accuracy, minus 10% motion accuracy, and plus 10% reload time. The minus 10% on static and motion accuracy is a flat 10% as far as I understand it. So if your accuracy is 60, it goes down to 50. Straightforward enough. So I'll make sure those are written on the screen as well for you to see while I've said that. At the moment, it doesn't appear that those stats are affected then by the military police. So to be fair, it's not a bad reduction. If you think about the TOR launcher on the NG Bradley, then it's 60%, it goes down to 50%. That's still a really strong missile launcher. I wouldn't stress over it too much, but the other thing about this deck is you can genuinely build it without taking any NG troops. So Lathans builds this without any National Guard forces. And you can do exactly the same. It's completely up to you how you build it. There are many different ways you can build this deck, especially around the infantry, okay? So what I'm putting here isn't the definitive, must be built this way. I recommend you, if you take it and have a go, have a look at what you're using, what you're not using, what's working for you and what isn't, and then change stuff out. I should probably stress that with all of these deck videos, and I do try to remember to say stuff like that, because I know some people have gone and had a go with them and they've had success, which is great. Very pleased. Someone let me know on the WarYes Discord that they had success with the 39th, how I built it and played it sort of the same way I do. So pleased to get that feedback and glad it worked for you. But obviously, as I said to that person, you've got to adapt these things to your playstyle once you find what your playstyle is. And different divisions you'll have to have different playstyles for to some extent. But 24th, very strong, lots of cheap activation point slots, okay? You're going to fill this deck up and you're going to have loads of spare points to then spend on other stuff. I can guarantee you that. Because that, well, it certainly applied to me and it applies to a lot of the guys in the tournaments and the rank ladder and stuff. So, let's start in the logistics tab. Pretty straightforward for me here. 2 cards of the M548A2, this little trucky thing. Each card of 4 means 5,000 total supply. And then I've got a card of the M35 supply, which is also 10 of 500, so another 5,000. So I've got 15,000 supply here. That's kind of the ballpark I want to aim for in a ranked deck. There is also the UH-1H, which would give you 6,000 supply for that card, but I will get this killed and I will be sad because they're 40 points apiece. M35 supply, 20 points if it dies when it's at the front. I'm not going to be too upset, but I'll be upset if I get the UH supply shot down all the time. I don't trust myself not to do that. If you do, crack on. They're very fast in response that way, so you can rearm stuff quickly. There's good reasons to take it. I just don't trust myself with it. Then I've gone for the Mutt command because you get 3 of them, and as I've said before, when it comes to commands, I take as many as possible for ranked decks. So it's the card with 3. Infantry tab is where you can go a lot of different directions. You could build this very easily without taking any of these NG troops at the end, okay? You do not need to take NG troops. You can fill this out with just standard forces. And they're not really that expensive either. It feels like a very cheap deck. So I've opted, and I'll tell you what I've opted for each one in turn, and I'll say why. So Ito, because you get 6 of them, 20 penetration is fine. These are going to be defensive units. I'm still going to have access to the TOW 2, and I've got access to a lot of good tanks. I don't necessarily need 3 TOW 2s to sit in a building. I feel like I've got access to enough other units to cover me there. The TOW 1 is still going to scare stuff off and do a lot of damage to most vehicles. And then I've gone for the military police. 10-man squad, reasonably priced, come with a good set of weapons. They're a very strong squad, and military police I think are sometimes underestimated because, you know, in a lot of decks the military police are quite mediocre. They're very small 4-man squads. And don't get me wrong, the Feldjäger, for example, are very good because they have fancy SMGs and you can spam those out. But the military police squad, pretty good, even at, you know, the 40-point price mark. I think they're a nice squad to bring in, and they come in pre-ranked up. You get 6 of them, pretty good. And when they finally fix the military police trait so that it removes the reservist trait, super. Yeah, that'll be very nice. Okay, then I've gone for 2 cards of Fireteam Dragon. They get the Dragon 2 launcher. It is very good. Don't underestimate that 18 pen. It can be very scary. I've got 10 over 2 cards by ranking them up. They're a good squad for fighting as well. They're only a 6-man squad, but they have quite a bit of firepower. To some extent, you're kind of bringing them for the dragon, but they can fight if they need to. I've brought both of them in the M151 Jeep. The truth is, you could actually bring these in the Bradley. It doesn't make them too much more expensive. It makes it 115 points. I'm a little worried about pricing, and that's why I haven't brought them in the Bradley. If I wasn't going to take the NG fire teams at the end in the NG Bradley, I would probably take at least one of these cards as the M2A1 Bradley, but I want to give the NG Bradleys a try. Some people have a lot of success with them, some people don't. Let me know in the comments if you've given this a go in ranked and if you've had some success with the NG stuff. And if you haven't, because I am curious who's succeeded with it and who hasn't and what tactics they've used. So, personally, I'm going to try them. And it might be the case that they get removed and I add maybe the Engineers Dragons or the Engineers as well, or even the MP Patrol M67, and change up this card here with the M2A1 Bradley, which gets the TOW 2 obviously. Then I've gone for the Fireteam AT4, and again I'm just bringing them in the Jeep, and these guys are for close range action against vehicles. The AT4 is very good. Again, you could potentially bring them in the Bradley. Nothing wrong with that. They're a pretty strong squad in my book. purely used as anti-tank, they're fine. But again, they can fight just like the other fire teams. And, you know, again, I've ranked them up. 5 per card is plenty in this division. You get so many single activation point slots here. Then I've also gone for the fire team law, which obviously not as effective against tanks as the AT4, but again, they're not a bad squad. You rank them up, you get 6 for this one instead of 5. And these ones I've actually brought in the Bradley, because they're a cheaper squad overall. They only cost 30 points, which is really cheap in the grand scheme of things. And then I'm bringing those in the Bradley so that I do have access to that M2A1 Bradley and the TOW 2 launcher. Then I've gone for my usual Engineer's Flash. I like these for clearing out infantry, for stunning them, for panicking them. I've ranked them up so I get the 5, and I'll try in this deck to keep those alive, even if I'm letting other infantry die. And then I've gone, as I say, experimentally for 2 cards of NG fire teams, the Dragons and the Law. Again, the Dragons aren't as good as the Dragon 2, but they're not bad. And again, 6-man squad, reasonable weapon set. Obviously, they have the penalty of losing, or having the reservist trait, so losing those extra stats, but I want to give them a go mainly for the Bradley spam, because even though it's the NG Bradley, the weapon isn't bad. It's still got the ITO, it's still 20 penetration, 60% accuracy goes down to 50%. I don't think that's doing a bad job still. It's still got the Bushmaster. It's still a pretty scary vehicle when you have lots of them, especially backed up by the wide array of tanks you get in this division. So that's why I've gone for these at the end. Fire Team Dragon and the Fire Team Law from the National Guard units. If they don't work out, I'll change them. If I'm going to change them, I'm very tempted to take the Engineers Dragons because they're a 10-man squad. They're pretty cheap. They come in a truck. And maybe even the Engineers. Again, a 10-man squad to get in the thick of it because they have that very nice shock trait. Other than that, here, you could take the Aero Rifles, definitely. Some people have a lot of success with these. I don't really put them in many decks, but nothing wrong with those either. And there you go. You could even take some commands here if you wanted. There's so many cheap slots, it's ridiculous. So that's what I went with in the end anyway. And these two, the NG Fire Teams, those 2 cards were added at the end because I had spare points. So I could have lived with just this lot. This was extra for an experiment. Artillery card, or artillery tab, I've gone for the M106A2 mortar. The reason for this is the 80 points. If you bring in the 107mm towed one, you only get 4 of them, and they cost 70 to bring in. And then once you might get a 20 back for the Jeep, obviously, but once they're down, they're not going to move very much. I actually feel like the mobile or self-propelled mortar here is not a bad choice because you still get 3 of them for the 107mm. Obviously, you're paying a little bit more, but you can keep them alive better, and I feel like they're not a bad option for this division. Usually, I just tend to go with the towed ones. And then, I've been umming and ahhing over this. I definitely want the M109s. And the question is, do you bring the M109A2 for the National Guard and take the penalty to its stats? Or do you take this bad boy, pay the extra 20 points, and don't take any penalties to anything? And I actually think, in the grand scheme of things, for the sake of 20 points, I'm actually going to go for the standard M109A2 and not the National Guard one. Because I think just the aim time and everything, because it's so high anyway, it's worth taking it for the extra 20 points, rather than have the reservist trait attached. Tank tab. Again, you could build this a couple of different ways, I think. I've opted to take 1 M1IP Abrams command and 1 M1 Abrams command. They're very similar in price, though, in all honesty. A couple of extra armor for 20 points. It's very close in price, to be fair. I kind of took it because it was cheaper, but in retrospect, I mean, I think either's fine. I think I'll leave it as it is, because if I'm sometimes you just want to save 20 points. So I'll go with that. Using them as commands and also using them to support the other tanks. Then we've got the M1IP Abrams, 3 cards of. All 3 cards are available. It's a decent tank. I wouldn't necessarily rank this all the way up. I think that's fine. It gives you 6 of them. So you have 6 decent tanks there. Then I've gone for 1 card of the National Guard M1 Abrams. I would use those in a more fire support role than necessarily always being my main battle tank. So yes, I'd send them up with the M1 IPs, but I'd make sure that M1 IPs were with them. I wouldn't just send these willy-nilly charging about because they're going to panic too quickly. And then I've also gone for the NG little tow jeep. I think this is very reasonably priced still. The ITO is still very good, as I say, and even if it loses 10% on accuracy, it's still pretty annoying and scary to spam about the place. You're going to play this division, I think, a lot of times with a bit of ATGM spam in mind. That's not going to work versus everybody, but, you know, it can be quite effective. You have to use that in conjunction with your tanks and your air tab. Recon, I think you could put more Recon in here, but I'm happy with what I've got. I've gone with the snipers because they obviously get forward deploy and just get me into nice positions early. I've gone with the scouts in the ACAV, puts the price up a little bit because the scouts are otherwise quite cheap, but the ACAV's still quite annoying. The ACAV has a heavy machine gun, it has the recoilless rifle, and it has a medium machine gun, so it's got quite a bit of firepower. Not as good as it once was, but not terrible. And then for the final item, I've chosen the M150. This has sort of gone in and out of fashion a lot. I mean, it's got the tow launcher, it's got a heavy machine gun, it's 40 points. The other option here, which I'd always consider, is the Bradley, and usually I end up taking the Bradley in a lot of decks, or I have in the past. But I have so many other Bradleys in this deck, or this division, I kind of didn't feel the need to have them here. So I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to go with the M150 and see where I get to with it. If I feel it's being useless, or it's dying too much and not doing enough, then I'll switch it out for the Bradley. But the other choice here that I consider as well is the Kiowa Warrior with the Hellfire. Obviously, you're going to have to babysit this now. It's going to be seriously at risk, but the Hellfires are still kind of scary. There are good reasons to take it, but I wouldn't suggest if you're very new to the game taking it. This is something to take when you're a bit more used to micromanaging your units. Now, people who are watching this for a ranked deck may well be at that level already, but just a piece of advice. Go for the ground ones until you're feeling pretty confident, especially with how helicopters are at the moment and anti-air. Anti-air tab, Stingers, Chaparrals, Pivads. Straightforward enough. There was a time people went for the OH-58Cs. I don't think I'd bother at the moment. The NG Stinger isn't horrendous, but, you know, the accuracy on the standard Stinger is better. It's the same price. Yes, you get 4 less, but it's because they're the same price, and that one is also getting the whole Reservist trait, so that actually goes down to 40, sorry. You're better off taking the Stinger. Chaparrals you could rank up, but then you'd only get 2, where I'd rather have 8 personally, just in case someone does destroy them, as they will be a prime target, because they are still very strong. And then I've gone for the Pivads, and I have ranked the Pivads up just to give them an extra boost in their accuracy. But the Pivads are pretty scary. They're a pretty good unit. Just remember they are radar, so you do have to babysit them a little bit if you're up against someone with seed. Helicopter tab. There's an argument for leaving this empty at the moment. There is an argument for leaving this empty. Helicopters are getting absolutely wrecked, and if they're not getting wrecked by the ground AA, then they're getting annihilated by aircraft. You know, lots of people like to throw aircraft at them. Cheap AA jets in particular. I've opted to take 2 cards of the Tow Cobra here because they're cheap, so I'm not as upset if they die, and also they still have the Ito. You'll notice a bit of a theme in this deck. I've got a lot of Itos going on. Lots and lots of ATGMs. Again, used in conjunction with your tanks and your aircraft, very strong. Good for locking down areas of the map. Just remember to try and stay mobile with some of these units because artillery and stuff will be scary. The Apache isn't a bad unit at all. Bear in mind it does now have the Reservist trait attached to it, so it gets some negatives. Hellfire is obviously pretty scary though, and it does have the ECM, but at the moment with how things are, I just felt like I'd rather have the Tow Cobras, and maybe I'd never bring them out, who knows. Then in the air tab, again, I think you could take more here if you were so inclined. I've gone for the Phantom because, well, it's got 5 Sparrow missiles. If I pin this and we take a look at the Eagle, I mean, the difference here is obviously the aim is better on the Eagle. The Sparrow is identical, but the Eagle gets 1 less, and their gun is identical. Obviously the speed is better on the Eagle, and it's got exceptional air optics, but you only get 2 per card, and they're very expensive at 270 points. It's not as good as the standard Eagle, the standard AA Eagle. The AA2 just isn't as worth it. So I think you're better off taking the F4E Phantoms here. And, you know, you get 4 per card. Is there something to be said for ranking it up? Maybe, but I probably wouldn't bother. I'd rather have the 4 per card. 2 cards of the Strike Eagle because it's really strong and dodges everything if you're lucky and does a lot of damage. And then I've taken a card of the Wild Weasel Seedplane because if you're operating the Strike Eagle, you kind of want to try and take out any radar AA as well. So, you know, you could bring out the Strike Eagle, bring out the Weasel behind it, and, you know, even if they manage to kill the Strike Eagle somehow, maybe at least the Seedplane will kill the AA. Or they might just not turn it on because they see that you've got the Weasel out as well. Mind games. There you go. A 24th ranked deck. Let me know what you would do differently down in the comments, in particularly in the infantry tab, and also if you've played it a lot, and in ranked in particular, sort of 1v1 is what we're going for here. Have you had much success with NG ATGM spam, or do you mainly just avoid the NG troops completely, like Lathans does? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.